It's Thursday, it's 12:15 and we're live in Westminster. Joining me, Conservative MP Andrew Rossendale, Labour Shadow Minister Jenny Chapman, New Statesman political correspondent Alva Ray and LBC radio presenter Nick Ferrari. Today,
I regret the way the event I have described was handled. I bitterly regret it and wish that we could have done things differently.
After the apology, the Cabinet circled the wagons.
I think Boris Johnson is the right person to be the Prime Minister of our country. I think he's the Prime Minister who will win the next general election.
But will the number of Tory critics grow?
I don't believe his position as Prime Minister and leader of the Conservative Party is tenable, and he does need to resign.
He looks like a liability, and I think he either goes now or he goes in 3 years' time at a general election.
I'm not going out killing that cow.
But your demand by paying for it means that someone has to kill it on your behalf.
Could this man persuade you to go vegan? And can Andrew Rossendale persuade the BBC to start doing this again? Well, let's start today's programme with reaction following Boris Johnson's apology in the House of Commons yesterday. He said he wished things hadn't happened the way they did in terms of that drinks event in Downing Street in May 2020. You heard a Cabinet Minister there, Brandon Lewis, in the headlines, rallying with varying degrees of enthusiasm from other Cabinet Ministers, but he said that he believed Boris Johnson would lead the Tories into the next election. Andrew, do you think he will?
Yes, I do. I think that although people are very disappointed by what's happened...
Are you?
I'm confused by it, to be honest, and I'm going to wait and see what the context is when the report comes out. But look, this country faces huge challenges, and a Prime Minister has a huge job to do to get Britain on the right track, whether it's dealing with the national debt we've now got, getting the economy back on track, dealing with the remainder of COVID, taking the opportunities of Brexit and all the things that we can do with global trade. These are more important rather than talking about a party that may or may not have taken place and in whatever context that might have been.
Well, the drinks event did take place.
It did. Let's see what the context is. But look, we have bigger issues to deal with in this country. And I think already people are starting to get a bit bored of hearing about a party rather than serious issues facing our country. All
right, well, I don't know what your evidence for that is as yet. But, Jenny, do you think Boris Johnson is the person that you'll be facing at the next election?
Well, that's up to the Tory party. I don't think he should be. I think it's time now. I think he's lost the confidence of too many people in the public and actually in his own parliamentary party. We've seen a few Tory MPs stand up and say, actually, now is the time. You don't get that for nothing. You know, that's happened because of decisions that he's made. He can't blame anybody else for this. He gave his apology yesterday, which was a very, very, thin, I've got nothing else I can possibly say to get myself out of this kind of apology. Saying that he was at an event, he didn't realise it was a party. It's just not credible. People have had enough. They don't. There are more important things. There absolutely are more important things. But it's only Boris Johnson to blame for the fact that we're not talking about those more important things. We're talking about things that he did. Our kids couldn't even go to school. People are very angry about this, and I don't think that Tory MP should be underestimating quite how angry people are.
All right.
Whether that lasts, let's see. But at the moment, I've never seen anger like this.
Nick, we don't know when the next general election is going to be. It could be a while off, sitting here now, looking at what's unfolding. But do you believe Boris Johnson will really lead the Tories into that election?
Unlikely, I would have thought. And Andrew, I've spoken to you more times than I can remember, and you're a decent bloke, your heart's in the right place, but you're wrong on this. I think anyone watching this programme, with you saying we should focus on the economy, if you weren't able to say goodbye to Grandma, or if you had to see a loved one taken off in an ambulance and you were never able to see them again, and you now learn, possibly on that day or around that period, the Prime Minister and all the lawmakers were busy eating cheesy Wotsits or whatever it was and drinking white wine, I don't know what it was, that's not something that will go. And to Jenny's point, and to answer your question directly, maybe in 3 years' time the memories will dim. But right now, and I know because you know the show that I do, people are ringing in. I tell you, Jo, I took a call yesterday, funny enough, from a woman called Jo, actually, who had to say goodbye to her husband. She was 80. She's voted Tory all her life. She bade farewell to her husband as he went in an ambulance, never actually physically got alongside him again. That sort of anger will fizz and simmer for years, and I just wonder if it will dissipate. You're right, I know what you're saying about the economy, mate, I really do, but for people who've lost loved ones like that,
Nick,
you've got a road to climb.
I don't disagree with you at all. I've had the emails, I've had people speaking to me. People are angry, and questions do need to be answered. The point I'm trying to make is that none of us really know the full facts. There is going to be a report. Well, we don't. There's a report being done.
I know,
so why don't we wait to see the full context, the exact details, and then the Prime Minister will have to react to that. We can go on debating it forever. I'd rather get on to day-to-day issues that we can really discuss. The actual issue of the party in Downing Street, that will come out in the report, and then decisions can be made after that.
You're buying yourself a bit of time with the report, for sure, and you're waiting to see whether the anger subsides. I don't think it will. I really want to be talking about health, about schools, about the economy, about the cost of living. I don't want to be talking about this. I'm quite ashamed that our Prime Minister's behaved this way, and to watch the leader of our country stand there and look the way he did and say the words that he had to say because he was being forced to do it. That's why Tory MPs, some of them, to their credit, are actually saying now he's got to go.
Are you saying it's right to judge before the report is published?
What
is that what you're saying?
What are we waiting to find out? Boris Johnson.
Why have a report then if you know the facts already?
Because Boris
what's
won't
the
come
point
clean.
of a report?
Because he said, first of all, he said there was no party. Now he says there was a party. Now he says I was there, but I didn't think it was a party while I was at it. I think we do know enough now, really, to come to some sort of conclusion. And really, the credibility of the leader of this country has now been damaged so much that I think it is time for him to go.
All right, well, on that, Alva, Jenny says he does have to go. There has been a big blow to Boris Johnson's authority. We're just going to show our viewers 4 senior Tories calling for the Prime Minister to resign. Sir Roger Gale, Caroline Noakes, Douglas Ross, the leader of the Scottish Tories, and William Wragg. Do you think that number is going to grow?
I'm not actually sure it will. I think this is actually why it's great to have Andrew on the show today, because I would say that even though he's maybe not letting himself acknowledge publicly how angry he is, I would say that actually what he's saying tallies with quite a lot of the conversations I've been having with Conservative MPs in private, that yes, they are angry about this, and the apology yesterday didn't go well. But actually, you know, Andrew's wording that he's confused and disappointed, but wait and see until the Sue Gray inquiry. That's where most of them are at. I think they, you know, for all that yesterday's apology didn't go down well, strangely, I think it's been a success for Boris Johnson. He has actually managed to buy himself a bit of time. He got through the day yesterday without any cabinet resignations. Obviously, take this with a pinch of salt, it could change, but it does look likely that he's survived. And by the time it actually gets to Sue Gray's findings, he probably has made the correct calculation that even if people remember this for a very long time, the outrage can't stay at fever pitch forever. Rishi Sunak is maybe unwilling to right now, and he might manage to cling on, even if his authority has ebbed away and will never completely return, and it doesn't last until the end of the year. I think for now he's managing to hold on.
And one of the ways, of course, to trigger a contest is for 54 Conservative MPs to send in letters calling for a vote of no confidence. We have no idea how many letters have gone in, and at the moment that will stay that way until that number is reached, if it ever is. And there was definitely a case yesterday that the Prime Minister was on a charm offensive after his appearance in the House of Commons at Prime Minister's Questions. Were you in the tea rooms, Andrew, to hear what Boris Johnson had to say to try and win you round?
No, I wasn't. I heard he was in the tea room.
And you didn't want to go?
Well, I was actually busy doing other things.
Really?
Yeah, I was. But I can talk to Boris anytime I want to. I see him regularly. He's very engaging. I have to say, I've been an MP 20 years and I've had different leaders of the parties. He's the most personal, easy to talk to, and he does listen. And I think he makes mistakes. He's human, and this was a huge mistake, Nick. I agree with you. This should never have happened, and certainly we need to get the answers to this. But look, he has a job to do for the country, and that's what I'm concerned about. I think of all the things we're facing, And I want him to focus on that and get the best for our country. That's what he should be doing as Prime Minister.
All right, well, let's discuss whether support is draining away at an even more senior level than the MPs I've mentioned. Rishi Sunak, Nick, the Chancellor, usually sat there next to the Prime Minister at PMQs. Yes, he had a very well-timed visit, let's put it that way. Let's just show everybody the tweet from Rishi Sunak. I've been on a visit all day today, continuing work on our plan for jobs, as well as meeting MPs to discuss the energy situation. The Prime Minister was right to apologise, and I support his request for patience while Sue Gray carries out her inquiry. That was 8 o'clock in the evening. What did you make of all that?
Quite late, a lot later than some of his colleagues. He's obviously possibly in the position to take over. And this is the question that Andrew and the other Conservatives have to ask themselves, and it is, I would argue, the biggest question to come out of the lot, which is, do they trade in a proven election winner, a guy who had the most extraordinary charisma? Do they trade him in for a relative unknown, someone off the subs bench, to take them into the next election? If, as you rightly say, if memory's dim, and I'd absolutely take the point, if memory's dim, then they're probably in a good place. But right now, they've got to be looking for someone to come out, because I think the level of anger, and that's why Rishi Sunak is obviously playing his card and others. And that's what I would imagine you'll be going back to your constituency. They'll all going back to their constituencies this weekend. They will be talking to the voters. They'll be talking to their party manager. You'll be trying to soak up in Romford, I believe it is, what the mood is in Romford High Street, wherever it is, where they're very angry about trees, I understand, at the moment. So they're equally angry about trees being chopped down. But the mood of Romford, the mood of wherever else, that is what they'll be wanting to dial into.
Is that what you'll be doing, testing the temperature of your constituents on this?
I will, as long as Network Rail stop chopping down trees.
Yeah, all right, well, we'll park the trees just for one moment.
I will, yes. No, I know what people think. They're not happy. A lot of people are angry. A lot of people feel very hurt and let down by this. But do they really want to chuck another Prime Minister out of office over this issue? Or are there actually long-term bigger issues that we need to address? And although people are unhappy, I think that people are in no mood to yet again have another upheaval and a different Prime Minister coming in. I just think that let's see what the report says and let's try and move on from this.
All right, let's talk to Henry Hill from Conservative Home. Welcome to you. We've just talked briefly, Henry, about Rishi Sunak and the implications of support draining away. How do you see it?
As far as I can see, the Prime Minister is probably hold below the waterline at this point. Even if he can get through the next few weeks, Conservative MPs know that magic touch, that ability to connect with the electorate, that is the reason they made him Prime Minister in the first place, that isn't coming back. And that's suddenly a very scary position for a lot of Tory MPs, because all of a sudden we're probably more than getting to the point where we're more than halfway through this Parliament, and they still want to be doing what they had hoped to be doing in 2019, proving themselves, proving that this government is actually going to deliver for those people who lent the Conservative Party their vote in 2019 for perhaps the first time. And so they are thinking, actually, maybe not right now, maybe not, in the middle of a cost of living crisis and all the rest of it, but probably this year, they're going to have to do something about it. Maybe a new Prime Minister is what we need. But the difficult thing for MPs is that many of them are torn between recognition that we perhaps need to change sooner rather than later, and the simple reality of the fact that if Boris Johnson doesn't want to go, then the mechanics of replacing him are actually quite difficult, because changing Prime Minister could actually be done relatively quickly, but the internal rules of the Conservative Party are what they are, and if there's going to be an actual contest between people rather than a coronation, then that will take time to put in place, and so you've got mechanical questions.
All right, Henry, thank you very much. We're going to hear from you again on Monday. I'm just going to play for all of you a clip from Douglas Ross from an interview. He's the leader of the Scottish Tories, calling for Boris Johnson to go. And then what follows is a response from the leader of the House, Jacob Rees-Mogg. Let's have a look.
I explained to the Prime Minister today that I felt he should stand down because of this, but that is ultimately his decision.
Douglas Ross has always been quite a lightweight figure, so I don't think that
Sorry, hang on. The leader of the Scottish Conservatives, an MSP and an MP is a lightweight figure.
I think the Scottish Secretary is a much more substantial and important figure in this.
Scottish MSPs.
Alva, what did you make of that? The implications there of a schism, if you like, between Westminster and Edinburgh, and what that means for the State of the Union?
remarkable, and especially saying that to a really esteemed Scottish journalist in Kirsty Wark. Just a really bizarre thing to see. I think it puts, I mean, you can see Douglas Ross's calculation. The Scottish Conservatives are in a really tricky spot in Scotland, have been for a while. This is so electorally unpopular. He has to distance himself from Boris Johnson. The response from Jacob Rees-Mogg, and supposedly in private Michael Gove too, is so hostile. It makes the Scottish Conservatives look slightly independent of the Conservative Party in Westminster, which is a very kind of paradoxical situation to be in, given their position on independence. It's really tricky for them.
Right, Andrew, I mean, what about the future of the Union, listening to that?
Well, I stood in Scotland. I was a Scottish candidate 30 years ago, my first parliamentary seat. It is different there. I think that deep down people are still British and they want to stay part of the Union. And I think the Scottish Conservatives are in a very difficult situation. So I don't think I agree with what Jacob said. I think the leader of the Scottish Party needs to be shown some respect and support, though equally so, I really don't think he should be telling the Prime Minister to resign. I think he should do what I'm doing, wait to see what the report says and let Boris make his own decision.
Should Jacob Rees-Mogg have really said what he did, called him a lightweight?
I think it wouldn't be words I'd have chosen personally, but that's up to...
How would you describe Douglas Ross?
Well, I think that Douglas Ross... I actually don't know him very well, to be frank, but he seems like a decent person. He's trying to lead the Scottish Conservatives to a better position. But I just caution one thing. I'm not saying about Douglas. A lot of the people that are trying to push Boris out at the moment are people who still resent the fact that Boris got Brexit done. And I think some people are using it to try and push him aside in the hope that they can unravel Brexit a little bit. That worries me.
Right. I mean,
Jenny? That's the strangest defence of Boris Johnson I think I've heard yet. But well done. I think he got his majority in 2019. And we have left the EU now, and up until all of this lying and pretending and standing there and not apologising, all the people you're talking about were very prepared to back him. So I don't think it's got anything whatsoever to do with Brexit.
Caroline Noakes was one of the arch Remainers, and she's the biggest critic on television attacking the Prime Minister at the moment.
With the best will in the world, we're not just talking about long-standing critics, are we? I've been talking to Tory MPs as well, and the benefit of no longer standing for election means that they suddenly relax and tell you whatever they want. And they're very unhappy. And that's not just new MPs. This is some of the longer-standing MPs as well. And I think they may not be coming out and saying it. And that's totally understandable that they're not coming out and saying it, but they really are angry.
Jenny, is it your hope and your colleagues' hope that the Tory MPs themselves will get rid of Boris Johnson for you?
I mean, part of me wants to join the Save Boris campaign because I think he's so toxic now. But actually, he's not fit to be the Prime Minister of this country. And that's
so do you think, are you hoping the Tory MPs will do it for you?
I think they need to for the benefit of the United Kingdom. And I just, that's difficult to say because I want a Prime Minister of whatever party to be credible, to put the interests of the country first, to do a good job for us domestically and on the world stage. This person can't anymore.
All right. Well, let's talk about the investigation because an awful lot is hanging on this inquiry being carried out by the civil servant Sue Gray. Let's talk to Katherine Hadden from the Institute for Government. Katherine, does Sue Gray need to reach a verdict?
Well, if you listen to the Prime Minister yesterday, he kind of implied that she would. It's not really clear. If you look at the terms of reference, it's largely talking about fact-finding, setting out the meetings, who attended, the setting and the purpose. And then it says, with reference to adherence to the guidance at the time. But that doesn't say whether she's going to rule whether these did or did not breach either guidance or law, or whether she's going to just set out the context of the guidance and leave it for others to make that judgment. And it's a really tricky thing to do because, I mean, listening to the Prime Minister's defence yesterday, talking about how he believed it was a work event, talking about how the garden is a place in which work is conducted. Obviously, as you said, everyone's seen the email and they've seen pictures of other events, so they'll make their own minds up about whether they think that's a social event or a work event. So it's it's very tricky for her. It's all going to come down to the language that she uses and what it looks like when it's on the page.
Right. I mean, Andrew, amongst others, is waiting eagerly for what Sue Gray will actually say and write down in response. Do you think in the end, Katherine, there'll be something for everyone to cling on to?
I suspect there could be. I mean, it is also, we call it civil service ease to try and, put in enough context to be very careful about the language that is used. And it could well be that there's lines in there that support the Prime Minister's defence, but also lines in there that undermine it. It could be that the sheer amount of events, seeing them all described in one report might be the killer blow. It might be that there's specific language there that says, no, this can't be argued to have been a work-related event by any measure, it breached the guidance, or it might say that it's very difficult to judge it, and it might sort of equivocate on all of that. So we could see whatever is written in there that the Prime Minister might, look at what supports him, and the case of the prosecution might rely on what supports them. So we might end up no better off with a lot more information, but not really much better off than we are at the moment.
Oh, no, we've got all that to look forward to, because I think it's expected sometime next week, perhaps early next week. But Katherine Hadden, thank you very much. Now, some of the language used to describe Sue Gray, she's fearless, she's independent. Not so, says West Streeting your colleague, the Shadow Health Secretary, Jenny. He tweeted this. Kirsty Walk, who you saw earlier, actually, from Newsnight, described Sue Gray as independent on BBC Newsnight. This is incorrect. She's a civil servant who reports to her superiors. She is in an impossible position with an impossible task, but it is inaccurate to describe her as independent. Really?
I think she probably... what Wes is saying, though, is just factually correct. She is a civil servant.
Well, no, it sounds like what Wes Streeting is saying is that she is biased, that she is partial.
Well, we're not saying that. What Wes is saying is factually right, though. It is an odd situation to put her in, and she's going to have to be fiercely independent of thought to be able to get to a place where she can say without fear or favour exactly what has taken place. I have confidence in the report that she's going to produce.
You do? And you'll trust what she says?
Yes, but you can't ignore the fact that we have a very odd system where someone who is, part of the civil service is investigating what somebody who is the head of the civil service has done. That is slightly odd, and you wouldn't perhaps find that in some other workplaces. So Wes is highlighting it's a fault of the system, if you like, and perhaps we do need to look at what other means we could have in the future. I don't think anyone ever considered that the Prime Minister himself would need to be investigating in this way.
Let's say she does come out, Sue Gray, next week and says Boris Johnson has done nothing wrong. Will you accept that?
Well, I don't think she can she, given what we all know? I think if she said that, we'd all think she'd probably lost her marbles. I mean, given what we know already, that would be quite a difficult thing to argue.
Nick?
There's an easy way for this to be resolved, I would suggest, and I think we all know something went on, to Jenny's point. I cannot for the life of me understand why the Metropolitan Police aren't taking a look at that. And I think all parties would agree that were they to assign an officer or officers to this, he, she, they went and had a look at it, whatever they came back with, we would all agree, whatever West Streeting might or might not say, what the police have investigated. And I still find it extraordinary that last month they chose not to, and this was before the latest storm broke, Jo, they chose not to get involved in the allegations that were swirling around courtesy of the Daily Mirror and the Guardian then, because they could see no evidence. Well, I thought the police officers actually go and find the evidence to see whether they pursue. I think that was a mistake, and I do think the Met having a look at it would help clear matters up.
Andrew, what does Sue Gray need to say to you for you to be able to back the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, with good conscience?
Jo, I want to see what the report says. I think we're sort of prejudging.
Yeah, but what are you waiting for? Because you said you want to see the facts. Fine, but what is it you want? What is it you want to hear?
Context. I wasn't there at the party. I didn't attend any parties during that period.
Fine.
I don't know who was there. I don't know the context of why the Prime Minister popped in, what he was told, who made the decisions. We're prejudging everything. Let's see what the report says, and then we can decide. We can judge Boris on what he did via that report, and if he feels that he needs to resign, that's his choice. If he doesn't, then that's also his choice, and the British people ultimately decide if he stays as Prime Minister or not. But we're trying to judge all this before we know all the facts. And I think that, as I said at the start of this discussion, We can talk about this till we're blue in the face. We go round and round in circles.
Oh, and we are.
Let's see the report, and then we can move forward. That's what I would suggest.
Alva?
Well, I think this is so interesting, that tweet from Wes Streeting and then Jenny's comments there, because actually in private, I think that obviously this is a Conservative story, mainly about Boris Johnson and his party, but this is a small area where the opposition parties, I think, do feel privately, certainly some will tell you, that they slightly made a misstep here in not calling for a judge to lead this inquiry and to sort of just accept that a civil servant would lead it. And I think Wes Streeting is now sort of signalling that maybe they do slightly regret that. Because the problem is that with the best will in the world, you know, civil servants do a really difficult and important job as impartial servants serving whatever government of the day without fear or favour. But you know, within the complex politics of having superiors, of working closely with government, she's going to be so aware of, you know, whatever way her comments are taken, they're going to have seismic implications. It'll be a civil servant taking out a prime minister or saving him. That's a terrible position to be put in. It should have been a judge leading the inquiry. That's the sort of gold standard of inquiries in this country. And I think obviously, you know, I think the opposition parties are in general pretty pleased with how they have scrutinised the government on this. But on this one, there was a little bit of maybe just an oversight. They didn't realise that it would all hang on what Sue Gray concluded.
Did you miss a trick here?
I just think it's extraordinary that we should be encouraged to have a judge-led inquiry into a party at number 10 when we know that there's a party at number 10. We know the Prime Minister was there. The only thing we really don't know is why he, you know, lied about it for so long, and the statement that he made yesterday. I honestly don't think we need a judge to come and tell us anything else. We know the facts, really.
So you aren't really waiting for the outcome of this inquiry at all,
Sounds like you're
having called for it, you feel you've got enough information.
I think the only thing that could happen is if Sue Gray came out and said, actually, Boris Johnson didn't know where he was, didn't recognise that cheese and pineapple on stick equals a party, didn't realise for 25 minutes, half an hour, what was happening, and then told everybody to leave.
As you know, Jenny, there are all sorts of defences that you've heard about whether it was an extension of a work-related... But anyway, let's leave that for Sue Gray, because Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary, has been in the Commons. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
We've made the decision to reduce the minimum self-isolation period to 5 full days in England. From Monday, people can test twice before they go, leaving isolation at the start of day 6. These 2 tests are critical to these balanced and proportionate plans, and I'd urge everyone to take advantage of the capacity we have built up in tests so that we can restore the freedoms to this country while we are keeping everyone safe.
Sajid Javid, their big announcement on the isolation period if you test positive for COVID. Do you support this change in position, that actually you can release yourself after 5 days if you have 2 negative tests, or you can release yourself on day 6 if you had a negative test on day 5 and day 6?
100%. I think that the quicker we get that life back to normal again, the better. This is a step in the right direction. So, yes, I do support it.
Jenny?
Boringly, I think yes. I mean, you know, if the medical advice supports it, which it seems that it does, then, of course, this is the right thing to do.
All right, we're going to talk about veganism, a slight change in topic. With us is a vegan activist and campaigner, Ed Winters. Hello to you, Ed. He's written a book called This is Vegan Propaganda. He's better known as Earthling Ed. He goes around the world trying to convert the most unlikely people to his cause. Here he is at a rodeo in Texas.
I get it. And I understand that. And all I want to do is just chat to you about it. No. It doesn't. I used to. What about my shoes? No, I don't drive, so that's fine. My shoes also, they're just fabric.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Because you don't have to hurt animals, right?
Okay.
Brave, Ed. I mean, do you ever fear for your safety?
No, not really, because the majority of people I speak to are very reasonable, and we can open up and have conversations. Just sometimes when we go to places, obviously at rodeos where it can be more heated, it's more likely there's going to be a little bit of animosity. But by and large, I always have very productive and fruitful conversations with people.
And what turned you into a vegan?
Well, there was two things that really led me to veganism. And the first was I came across this story about a truck crashing on the way to a slaughterhouse near Manchester. And the truck was carrying about 6,500 chickens. And the journalist had said that hundreds had died from the impact, but there were hundreds more who were suffering. Some were running into oncoming traffic. And I started to feel sympathy for chickens, which I'd never done before. But in my fridge was a KFC because fried chicken was my favorite food when I used to eat animals. And so I was feeling sorry for chickens, but also consuming them and paying for them to go to slaughterhouses to have their life taken from them. So there's a bit of a paradox. So I thought about my values when it came to animals, and I thought about how I viewed my relationship with non-human animals. And I said, if I'm against animal cruelty, then what could be more cruel than subjecting an animal to a life where they're farmed and exploited, mutilated, have their autonomy denied to them, and then are ultimately taken to a slaughterhouse and put in a gas chamber or have their throat cut. So that turned me to vegetarianism. And then about 8 months later, I went vegan because I saw a documentary called Earthlings. And at that time, I had a hamster called Rupert, who was like my pet at that time. And I remember looking at Rupert after watching this documentary, which is very objective about what happens to animals and pretty uncompromising when it comes to the brutality of what we do. And I remember looking at my hamster Rupert and saying, he's a little individual with a personality, likes and dislikes. And I thought about all the animals who are exploited for dairy, eggs, meat, and all the other ways that we harm them for things that we just take for granted in everyday society. And I thought about how I could morally justify that. And I realized that there was no moral justification to arbitrarily and unnecessarily exploit someone else when I don't have to.
All right, Ed, just stay with us. Nick, I'm going to ask all of you, actually. Are you a vegan? Have you ever considered being a vegan?
I've never considered being a vegan. I have nothing but respect for people who are vegans. My partner's daughter is a vegan, so this Christmas I cooked my first ever vegan Christmas.
Did you?
I did. I also had somebody who couldn't get out of the country who was Muslim, so I did halal, and I did a turkey as well. So it was like being a restaurant.
That's impressive.
I know. I did all three, Jo. I did all three.
Jenny, what about you?
I am very impressed by Nick's
He might invite you
No,
next year.
I'm not a vegan. I'm not.
And would you ever consider it?
Probably not. I mean, I like corned beef slice and gravy and pork pies and Scotch eggs, and there's
meat.
There's a very fine pie shop in Darlington called Taylor's, and I'm a very keen customer, and I just couldn't do without it. But I like vegan food as well. There you go.
Well, I think if you had to define it, I would be a flexitarian. I try not to eat very much meat, more for environmental reasons. But I just think veganism is a big challenge. I think it's great advocating for people to eat fewer animal products, but it's such a lifestyle commitment. I have lots of friends who are vegans, and you really have to be quite a good cook to make it work.
Andrew?
Well, I respect everything that Ed is saying. I believe in animal welfare. I believe that we have a duty to animals to care for them. But I think that if people choose not to eat meat, to be vegan or vegetarian, that's freedom of choice. So people should make their own decisions. Ed can make his arguments, but the rest of us have to decide what's best for us. I don't think it's something that it should be, you're evil if you eat meat, you're a bad person. I do think that the facts should be there and people should be able to make their own decisions in a free society.
Ed, would you like to try and persuade Jenny, for example, who loves her pie shop in Darlington?
Absolutely. I mean, Jenny, the question that we have to ask ourselves is what has higher value, sensory pleasure, the enjoyment we get from eating these animal products, or the lives of these sentient beings? Because when we say that we are allowed to do what we do to animals because we enjoy how they taste, we're saying that the 15 minutes or so of sensory pleasure that we get from consuming them has higher value and is worth more than their entire existence. Because, of course, when we eat animal products, including dairy and eggs, an animal's autonomy has been denied to them. They've been exploited throughout their entire life, and they all end up in a slaughterhouse where they're put in a gas chamber or have their throat cut.
All right,
so that's the question.
Jenny, are you persuaded?
I mean, I'm not. I'm not anti-vegan. I enjoy vegan food, but I enjoy other things too. I do agree, though, with what's been said about information, and I think that us having a better understanding of where our food comes from, I think the more food that is produced here in the UK that we eat, the better. Farmers' jobs, very important. And actually, when we're looking at...
What does have higher value, taste or life?
Livelihoods. Livelihoods. We have
but we can still protect livelihoods of farmers.
But also the environment. And there are, I think that we need to... If I had my way... most of what I ate would come from the region where I live. It wouldn't be imported across the world and use vast amounts of water or take up rainforests to produce. I want to eat locally. I want to eat high-quality, nutritious food.
And how are those animals killed, Jenny?
I know how they're killed. You've done actually a fair... Well, I don't need to because you just have.
No, Jenny, I'd like you to tell me how they're killed.
You might like me to, but I think we all know. What I want to do is eat a varied diet, and I'm not against anything that you're doing. All power to you. But I think as well that it's fair for others who maybe have a different ethical framework to you to make the choices that they want to make and to support their local food producers. Can
I just pick up on something, Ed? Because in terms of this assumption by many people that going vegan is a healthy and healthier option, you know, we've done a little bit of research, and Ian Givens, Professor of Food Chain Nutrition, Director of Food at Reading University, he warns about the risks that come with cutting out meat and dairy without replacing the nutrients they provide. Could include weak bones, osteoporosis, well, that is, I suppose, weak bones, and potential life-changing fractures in adulthood. Do you accept it's not an easy option in terms of being able to have a balanced diet and actually could result in you damaging your health?
Well, it's easy when you're educated, and of course we have to be educated on how we get our nutrients. And so the word you use, which is really important, is replacing. So of course, if we switch from animal products to plant products and don't replace the calcium and the iron that we get from the animal products, then we will have problems. But once we recognize where we can get iron and calcium and the nutrients that we need from plants, it's just as easy as making those swaps. So everyone who makes a change and everyone who eats, which is all of us, should be, you know, fundamentally aware of where we get our nutrients from, vegan or not. But it's still absolutely possible, which has been confirmed by the British Dietetic Association, the NHS, who have all said that a plant-based diet can be healthy, which of course means making sure that we're eating all the nutrients that we need.
Andrew?
Yeah, look, all this is fine. And I agree with what Jenny has said, that you are making great arguments and people listening can make the choices about what they want to do, how they live their lives, what they choose to eat. So please carry on making the arguments you're making. More and more people are becoming vegans, I'm aware of that, and that's their choice. But we live in a free society, so people must make their own decisions about what's best for them. But I do really take on Nick's point about our farming community and the livelihoods of people, and I think that
which can be made bigger, as Jenny was saying. Let's get more out there.
And locally home produced food is exactly what we should be doing, and hopefully Brexit will help us to do that better.
Well, I mean, on that, I think that is a serious point about doing the trade deals that we're going to do. I think one of the fundamental principles we must make sure we don't lose sight of is that our high food standards and the quality of the food we produce here is protected, and that we can make that food more affordable and available for people and not undermine it.
And just finally, Ed, what about Andrew's point about, and Nick's, livelihoods, about farmers, about that whole community?
Well, vegans support farmers and support farmers' livelihoods as well. But of course, what we need is a just and fair agricultural system that supports the planet, that supports us as humans. And the system that we have right now is doing the opposite. I mean, animal farming in the UK, for example, just animal farming uses 48% of the entire land mass. And yet when we look at our intactness of biodiversity, out of 218 countries, we were ranked 189th. So there's a big problem where farmers aren't stewarding the land in the way that they should. So we need a different agricultural system, but that doesn't mean that we just disregard the livelihoods of animal farmers. It means that we help them transition to plant-based farming or rewilding, and they become publicly funded land managers who are subsidised just as they are now to recreate nature rather than to continue to destroy it.
Convinced, Andrew?
Well, some of it may well be correct. And the great thing is that we've got control of our farming policy again, and we can decide what our priorities are. We can decide if we subsidise farmers for doing different types, different usage for their land. And that's our decision now. So we can make our own choices, as the British people must make their own choice about whether they wish to be vegan, vegetarian, or continue to eat meat.
Nick?
Publicly funded land managers, what the hell are they? Just put the bloke or woman on his or her tractor and let them go and feed the sheep or the cattle and take them to market. It's been known fine for centuries.
But it's not doing fine, Nick, is it? Because we know that animal agriculture is one of the leading drivers of climate change and results in the death and exploitation of billions of animals. It's the opposite of doing fine. We're warned time and time again by the UN, by the leading environmental organisations around the world that we need to change that system.
Have you had powers? Would you seek to restrict people eating meat? Were you to have powers?
No.
You would not.
I don't want to mandate things. I want to educate people to understand that there's a better, more ethical, more sustainable and healthier way ultimately
then you
that
must
we can
accept
farm and
people
use
have
our
other
land.
Views.
All right, on that, Earthling Ed.
Of course they do, but we can have open conversations.
We can, and I've enjoyed it.
And we've had a very open conversation. Thank you very much for joining us. Moving on to something completely different. Do you remember this?
We're heading for some shut-eye, but please join us again and enjoy the rest of the weekend. Good night.
Well, that was the last time the BBC played the national anthem at the end of a day's programming in 1997. It all changed with the onset of 24-hour news. Andrew, you want it to come back. Why?
Yes, I do. I think we should be proud of our country. This is the year of the Platinum Jubilee. I'm tired of the wokeness. BBC have got to start realising they are the British Broadcasting Corporation. I think 30 seconds at the end of the day, and by the way, programming doesn't end, it switches to News 24, so that little gap in the middle, when it switches, that's when it could be played. Why can't we be proud of our country, play the national anthem just once a day for 30 seconds? Imagine the young people growing up hearing it. When I was growing up, I used to hear it and I knew what it was. Young people today don't know what it is.
It is played at the end of programming on Radio 4 before they switch to the World Service.
It is, but why not BBC One? That's the main channel of the BBC. I don't see why for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee it cannot be restored.
Well, it's good to know that you were obviously still up at 10 to 3 or whenever that was. Jenny, do you think it's a good idea?
I'm not against it at all. I mean, but I do think it's up to the BBC to decide. I don't know many young people who are up watching, you know, waiting for the transition to BBC News. Actually, the most of them that I know and live with are kind of on YouTube or doing something else. But there we are. I mean, it's not a bad idea. Why not? I wouldn't be against it at all. But I just think that when you have politicians saying exactly what the BBC should broadcast when, there's something a bit strange about that.
Alva?
It's a little bit North Korean almost. I'm completely okay with the idea. I think that there is just something funny about bringing that back in when it does sort of it does smack us a little bit antiquated. And I also think that just unfortunately for Andrew, we're kind of politically not really in a place where, you know, there are communities within the United Kingdom that don't really see themselves as British anymore. Mainly, you know, Scottish nationalists who are seeking independence. Obviously, the nationalist community in Northern Ireland, as well as in Wales to a lesser extent. You know, there are pockets where that sort of won't really land as well, and that's just the sort of the tricky reality of it. It's still the British Broadcasting Corporation, but not necessarily one that would naturally play God Save the Queen every night. All
right, I'll come to you, back to you in just a moment. Nick, what about your response to the idea?
Shouldn't be mandated, but I'm fortunate enough I've lived in 2 other countries on this planet. I love Britain. This is the best country in which I've ever lived. I lived in Australia and I lived in the States, and I remember my children every morning used to have to swear allegiance to the flag. I don't think it did them any harm, and actually to that point, if it helps unify the country, I can see a merit to it, but I don't think the BBC should not be mandated to do something such as that.
No one's suggesting they're mandated, but I just think, as a gesture to our Queen in the Platinum Jubilee year, wouldn't it be great if at the end of the day we heard it just for 30 seconds? And you're right, Jenny, not all young people are up till late at night, but now and again you'd hear it and it would signify something. National symbols are very important. They bring people together, and being British is something we should all be proud of. But if you get rid of our national symbols, you divide people up. And in the end, it becomes about other differences take precedence to actually the unifying force of being all British together.
Well, if you do believe it is such a force for good in the way that you have described it, Nick mentioned living in America. Would you like to see it played in other places?
Yes,
in schools,
definitely.
In cinemas,
yes.
in, you know...
I think that I'd like to see every school, at least once a week in assembly, sing the national anthem. I think children, young people, are naturally patriotic. They love their country for lots of different reasons. I go to my local schools in Romford and they're very proud. Some of them do have the flag outside of the school, and I encourage all schools to promote British values and patriotism, love of country. And in the year of the Jubilee, it's a great opportunity to explain why Britain is such a great country, and the Commonwealth. And of course, the Queen is Queen of many other Commonwealth countries as well.
All right, I don't think we have actually any more time, but thank you to all of our guests for being on the show today. I will be back tomorrow at 12:15 with Politics UK. Please join me then. Bye-bye.